Hello, everybody. I was submitted this article in my Discord by some of my, some of y'all, and I thought it was interesting, so here I am covering it. I really want to kickstart the channel again, get back to making content like I used to, so be ready for that. Now, before we begin with the article, I want to let you know that I am very pleased and proud to announce to you all my second amazing campaign with the incredibly talented folks at Makeship, and the stunning work that they've done once more. Featuring Rags 2.0. This amazing chibi doggo is as cute as he is snarky, but he's your friend through and through. For a very limited time only, this unique campaign offers an excellent chance to support the channel and the talent at Makeship by picking up this limited time doggo plush. This time around, Rags might be a little bit more loungy, but he's still hard at work watching all the bad movies and shows the world puts out for him. He even has a removable bottle full of yummy goodness to help make all the movies just a little bit better. So pick up yours today, please, and remember, once the campaign runs out, it's gone forever, so don't delay. A link is right in the description, ready for you to go over to Makeship and maybe pick yourself up one. To each and every one of my viewers and my patrons, I am extremely grateful. Thank you very much for watching all my stuff, for making all this possible, and whether you pick up the plushie or not, whether you give on Patreon or not, just the fact that you're here and watching, enjoying all this, and commenting, I really, really appreciate that. It means a lot to me. Thank you very much. This article is from the Scientific American. Video game players avoid gay characters. A study of gamer behavior finds they shy away from gay characters, regardless of their strengths. As we go through this article, I don't know if it will be of any importance. Maybe some people care. I am quite the gamer, avid video game enjoyer, Chad gamer here. And I don't just enjoy video games, I enjoy all sorts of different things. For you see, I am myself bisexual, and I'm also a dog, though I don't know if that will be of any importance in this video. So we'll see how I feel about an article that says video game players avoid gay characters. Now, I don't typically think about that sort of thing when I'm choosing a character to play in a video game, but let's check it out. I like video games because they give me choices that I don't have in real life. When I want to feel like a princess, I choose Peach and Mario Kart. Alright, listen, I've never been royalty, I've never been a monarch, and I've never been a princess. I would imagine, though, that it is an atypical experience of what you would associate as being a royal princess than to go go-karting. Do you really, I want to ask this author, already, this is so bizarre. If you want to feel like a princess, you play Peach in Mario Kart. Because that's what it is to feel like a princess, is to play Peach in a go-kart racing game, a wacky go-kart racing game. Okay, if that makes you feel like a princess, good on you, I suppose. Already, bizarre start. If I want to fight like Bruce Lee, I can choose martial law in Tekken. Oh yeah, I suppose, yeah, a simulated version of martial arts, you know, fighting like, yeah, that one makes far more sense than choosing Peach in Mario Kart makes you feel like a princess. What does he think that peasants, like little mushroom peasants, will come out from the little side maintenance area and change your wheels for you, gas up your cart for you so you don't have to do it yourself, so you don't get your dainty princess hands dirty? When picking out which character to play in a game, players factor in an avatar's strengths and weaknesses, and even their appearance. But players also make their choices based on attributes that aren't apparent during gameplay and have no influence on the game, such as a character's sexuality. I'm sure that element exists, of course. I'm curious how prevalent it actually is. I mean, there's certainly characters that I won't play in games because I just find them physically repulsive, or I find their personality annoying and grating, and I don't want to play as that character. It turns me away from playing that character. And if I feel that some of these attributes about a character are simply used for tokenism, shall we say, it does put me off from playing that character. It starts to cross into more meta elements of why I pick what I pick, and I feel like that happens with other people as well. If you feel like there is a character in a game whose, let's say, sexuality or gender or anything like that is only there in order to try and be some corporate bit of marketing to appeal to da-da-da and be da-da-da, and it doesn't feel heartfelt, then that can turn me off from that character. That character starts to go further into being more of a product. They're all products, of course. They're not real, but it tears the veil down between a character being a fictional personality and being just some product for consumption given to me by a corporation. And I generally want to avoid being a part of that. Some companies actively support social movements through publicity and marketing campaigns and product labeling. However, backlash could deter these companies from supporting marginalized groups and discourage gay players from participating. I think it's the nature of the backlash that's important, right? If you come out with a game and every character is gay, then that doesn't seem genuine. It doesn't seem right. It automatically starts to make me go, huh? Every character is gay? That's interesting considering general demographics. If you try and push it super duper hard, this character's gay, this character's bisexual, this character's black, this character's trans, this character's whatever nationality, if you do that constantly over and over, and it seems to drown out everything else, and you're really trying to virtue signal about how you're an inclusive and progressive company, then again, it comes off as being insincere. It comes off as being fake, and it's a bit insulting. I'm a bisexual guy. I don't need to have a company tell me, hey, we put a bisexual person in the game for you. Like, no, it's patronizing. I'm not a child who needs to be catered to on every regard. I don't need to see someone who shares my sexuality in order to like them or relate to them. And while, yes, it would be bizarre if games never had characters who were gay or bisexual or anything like that, to try and push that so hard in order to make yourselves feel good or to seem as if you're hip with the modern progressive messages, again, it comes off as fake. And it'll make me feel like I'm being manipulated or that you're trying to manipulate me. How do players factor in these kinds of character traits, and what are the implications for online harassment and discrimination? The first-person shooter game Overwatch, which is widely popular and has generated more than $1 billion in revenue so far for its owner, Blizzard, has turned out to be an ideal laboratory for me and my colleagues to investigate these questions, if you say so. In that sense, what happens within Overwatch has economic and societal implications. Alright, the biggest societal implication of Overwatch was its porn, okay? I know Blizzard would like it to be otherwise, but let's be clear, Overwatch has had virtually no cultural impact whatsoever now. I mean, I suppose in its heyday, when it was big, it had a cultural impact, but that's everything when it's currently popular. Looking back, even now that we have Overwatch 2, I mean, Overwatch 2's reputation is marred by its business model. The idea of what happens within Overwatch having societal implications. Calm down. Like, what happens in Overwatch truly affects society. It's like, chill, alright? And if we're going to be talking about the economic implications of what happens within Overwatch, then you need to take a look at battle passes, free-to-play business models, grinding to earn. That's what you should be focused on. And a bad in-game business model, if anything else, is certainly inclusive to all of us. In Overwatch, players can choose between 32 avatars that have different... It's strange to call them avatars. It's very weird. 32 avatars that have different appearances and skill sets. As an additional marketing highlight, Blizzard regularly updates the background stories of these characters. Their stories have no effect whatsoever on the game. They don't change the character's skills or appearance. Still, these stories are so important for the fan base that they influence Overwatch in another way. Now, my knowledge of Overwatch is not too extensive. I've played maybe a couple hundred hours of Overwatch since it has released way back whenever that was. I don't know anything about character backstories. I don't know anything about the lore or anything like that. As far as I know, it exists outside of the game in like a similar way for, I guess, Apex Legends. I just don't know anything about these characters, and I don't really care. It's not why I play. It's not something that I have a particular interest in. In May 2019, an Overwatch writer updated the background story for one male character, Soldier 76. He wrote that Soldier 76 had been in a romantic relationship with another man and identified as gay. It was a bit of information that is far from unusual in the real world, but in online gaming it was somewhat revolutionary. Alright, we need to stop acting as if having a gay character is revolutionary in gaming. We need to freaking chill. Players do not care if a character is gay. If you try to make that element the only aspect of their personality and constantly shove it down everyone's throats, then yeah, it will certainly be harder to ignore, and it will come across as repulsive and cheap and not genuine. And I think it's certainly less common to have a gay character, because gay people are less common than straight people. And if you're marketing products and you feel like, after all, if you want characters to relate to the people on the screen, and part of that goes into having people playing as characters that match their sexuality, skin color, anything like that, which is not necessarily what I'm saying, that's just what I hear from certain people, then you're going to have to understand that the result of that is that the vast majority of characters are going to be straight and male. If we lived in a society where everybody was gay and the straight people were the minority, then I wager that almost all the characters, or certainly the majority of people in the games, would reflect that as well. You'd have mostly gay characters. And if I was straight in that hypothetical world where I was in the minority, I don't see where I'd have a problem with that. How could I? Of course, I'm in the minority when it comes to my sexuality. I can't expect to have most people in fiction match my sexuality. It would certainly be odd if there were no straight people, but I would certainly have to stop and think about why things were the way they were. Because it's not always malicious reasons. If anything, it seems malicious when you try and do something that isn't heartfelt, when you try and say, oh, actually Soldier 76 is gay, and he's been gay all along. And you try and make this a big deal, and you say that, oh, if you don't play him now, you're a bad person, or da-da-da. Trying to weaponize people's sexualities for marketing purposes, that seems far more malicious. The announcement resulted in hundreds of responses on Twitter and other social media channels. Many players supported the announcement and liked the tweet, but some players were uncomfortable with the decision, accusing Blizzard of making money through political correctness, complaining that the announcement was unnecessary, and even threatened to stop playing Overwatch. There certainly seems to be a large segment of the population who, when they see a corporation try and use political correctness, diversity, inclusion, in their marketing and putting it in their games, were very jaded by this idea that it isn't genuine, that it's just being used to put a token in there, to say that we're progressive, to virtue signal about how we're good people, and a lot of times it doesn't come across as genuine or real. It's this corporate tactical use of these elements and attributes that make it seem fake. And if people have a character in a piece of media who's a really well-written character, they're very, very likable, and all of these other far more important things about their personality and who they are as a person are in the forefront, and you have an element of their sexuality, which I just don't regard as a very important element of a character, honestly. If that is being pushed up on a pedestal above far more important things, then they're going to raise a brow at that. And some people might feel infantilized by that. They might feel patronized too when this happens. And so just threatening that they won't play the game, or saying that they're not going to play the game anymore, I don't think that's an unreasonable reaction if they feel like they're being manipulated by a company. It's like in the real world, if you have someone who either you work with or who you're acquaintances with, someone you meet oftentimes, and they're constantly only talking about their sexuality, regardless of what it is, then understandably a lot of people will simply be turned off by that. If you're not being a person first and you're just being a vessel of sexuality all the time, that turns people off. It turns them away. They won't want to hang out with that person anymore necessarily. They won't necessarily want to hang out with that person. Our research team wanted to know if this announcement influenced the game itself. Would players change their attitudes towards Soldier 76? We examined the pick rate, the frequency with which players choose a specific character, before, during, and after the announcement. Surprisingly, we found an extreme drop in the pick rate for Soldier 76 after the news. Players shied away from playing with the newly outed character. Now, I double-checked and I looked at changelogs, balance notes for Soldier 76, and there were no nerfs during this period that might have also affected the pick rate. Though I did take a look at the article that he links here. Do LGBTQ supporting corporate policies affect consumer behavior? Evidence from the video game industry. I went to the conclusions of the paper. The concluding remarks stated that our empirical analysis shows that the announcement resulted in a significant short-term drop in demand for this character, which, however, returned to its previous level after 3 months. The announcement coincided with a significant increase in demand for the game's only other LGBTQ character. The lack of consumer-level data is a limitation to further explain the mechanisms behind the drop in demand. I feel like the reasons behind these pick rate changes are the most important part. If it was me, and I felt like a character was being used as nothing more than a mouthpiece in an empty vessel to exemplify the progressive messaging of the corporation that ultimately is trying to sell me products, then I would feel less desiring to play that character. That character would seem less genuine to me. More of a product and less of a personality. Interestingly, instead of choosing Soldier 76, several players chose the only other LGBTQ character in the game, a lesbian called Tracer. Though Soldier 76 had previously been assumed by most to be straight, Tracer had been openly gay since the game was published. I think when the predominant market of people who play video games is male and straight, there's going to be more of I don't want to say approval. I'm trying to think of the right word for it. Most straight men they find lesbians hot. They like lesbian stuff. I've never really been into it myself, but that is my understanding. And if you have a character who has a very, attractive personality, Tracer, I suppose, very peppy and upbeat, and a lot of characters know that she's a lesbian, that's something that they find sexually attractive in its own way. And if someone is sexually attractive in a video game, I think that will affect their pick rate. If someone is very beautiful, if they're, I think that has something to do with it. It's why most video game characters you play as are pretty, right? It's why a lot of people like to have avatars of themselves in games and programs who are very physically attractive. And especially among generally youngish, mostly straight men, that kind of sexuality element is just going to be sort of a part of their personality in the sense of they're thinking about it, right? At least that's my hypothesis. I think that if you play a game and you can get some level of very, very passive, slightly sexually adjacent satisfaction from playing a character who has a good personality, who's attractive, and a lesbian, that will be more than having this character that a company says, oh, they're gay, and you as a straight guy don't find that as appealing. Because I think that it's just a reality that most straight people find lesbians more appealing than gay people, at least in the sense of the actual act itself. Being gay implies having a homosexual sexual encounter or experience. So I think a lot of people who don't find that appealing at all, or who are put off by that sort of thing because they are straight themselves, that might rub off on the character. Especially if you try to push it really far, if you try to push it prominently. In the same way I feel if we had a character who was, if a company released a character, and that character was, in the universe of the game, a pedophile, or if they were a zoophile or a necrophile, right? If they had these very bad sexual elements to themselves, And of course, it never showed up in the game. It was never really mentioned. It was just one of those things that was pushed by the company as being their sexuality. Then I think that would drastically negatively affect their pick rate, because if you're making it a part of this character, and that is a horrific element of this character that is just, we find it so extremely distasteful in our society, I wouldn't blame people for picking that character less. Now, obviously, I'm not saying that homosexuality is a negative trait at all. I'm just wondering if there is a link between sexualities that people find more or less appealing and the pick rate. And I don't think it has to necessarily do with bigotry. I think it's simply an element of, you're trying to push this character's gay aspect very hard. The gay aspect implies gay sexual activity, which I, hypothetically, as a straight person, find distasteful or unappealing or gross. So it does, in a way, sort of, quote-unquote, taint that character. Whereas the opposite happens, perhaps, with Tracer. To understand what was going on, we used an online survey to ask players what they thought about the announcement and how it influenced their gaming experience. Hundreds of players responded. Most respondents were men, 84%, and from North America, 49%, and Europe, 40%. The majority had heard about Soldier 76 being gay but didn't care. They reported that changing a character's sexuality had no influence on the game. A large minority, however, felt uncomfortable and that other players discriminated against them when they played as Soldier 76 after the announcement. They got tired of homophobic slurs and constant harassment and temporarily switched to other characters to avoid it. Now, in an article that you're writing here for the Scientific American, it's probably good to maybe show what the majority was here, because we say the majority heard and didn't care. A large minority felt uncomfortable that other players discriminated against them. What are these numbers? And I'm not going to go through the entirety of the thing to show to look for the numbers, am I? I mean, I did a casual read through of the study, but I feel like if you're not going to tell me these sorts of things, then it just kind of feels misleading to say that a large minority felt a certain way. Like, what do you mean? Like 10%? 15? 20? 30? What do you mean? Now, either way, personally, I don't really approve of people being using homophobic slurs and stuff, Do I think people should take that shit way less seriously? Yeah, I do. I think people should just ignore that stuff. It's a competitive gaming environment. People want to poke at each other. They want to prod. They want to insult. And so if you give a character now a new trait that can be made fun of, then it's just going to get taken advantage of. That's just the natural element of it. It's anything that they can use. If someone wants to insult you or make fun of you, anything that they can use, they will use. I'm certainly super hesitant to assign gay-related insults to actual homophobia, right? I mean, I call people stuff all the time, right? That doesn't mean that I necessarily link any meaningful, impassioned depth to an insult that I make. Especially nowadays, where calling something super gay is almost like its own joke in and of itself. It seemed to be just a very short-lived thing because player counts returned to what it is before, and now, as far as I'm aware, no one even thinks about it or talks about it. And again, it's impossible, as far as I am aware, to know how many people do the things they do just to backlash against a company because they feel manipulated with sexual tokenism. Additionally, many players mentioned that the gaming community makes an important distinction between the only two LGBTQ characters in the game, where Soldier 76 is a man, Tracer is a woman. Some players reported in the survey that they felt other players see lesbians as appealing and interesting, but that the same players voiced disgust towards gay men. I think there's a lot of truth in this, in the sense that if most of your game, as I mentioned before, if your game is predominantly males who are straight, there is an appealing quality that lesbianism has to them that homosexuality does not have within other men. For instance, if you are straight and you are watching two women who you generally find sexually attractive, if you see two women doing something sexual with each other, then that has a sexual appeal to you, right? that is going to be different than you watching two men who you are not sexually attracted to doing sexual things with each other. And again, as I said before, if you try and push the homosexuality of a character, or as a company or corporation try and make that a very key component of who that character is, then it is going to have exactly that effect. And the implications of, again, homosexual activity, they're not going to be appealing to a lot of straight people. And I don't think that necessarily that comes from a place of bigotry, or comes from a negative place. It just comes from the natural result of associating a character in a game in this way with an activity that most people find just gross. I mean, I get it. I understand that the things that I might do sexually with another man are not at all something that a lot of straight people want to hear about or certainly want to visualize. It's something that they just don't find attractive. Just like there are plenty of sexual activities that I find very gross, regardless of the gender of the participants. And being reminded of the things that I find gross just wants to, I want to put it at a distance a bit. I'm not making moral or character-related judgments on people who like those things. I just find it distasteful personally. Detecting discrimination is important and sheds light on a problem. The next step, however, is to find a way to decrease discrimination. And I wonder, when they say finding ways to decrease discrimination, will that be done in a more authoritarian way, or will it be done encouragingly? Will they say players must not discriminate against characters in any way, even if it's something as simple as just pick rate? How would you even force players to play characters that you want them to play, regardless of anything else? Or is the key to try and encourage them to do so? Because if you're trying to soft encourage them, you're going to have to accept that some people are just not going to want to play certain characters for a wide variety of reasons. It could be simply down to aesthetics, personality. It could be sexuality. It could be, I guess it could be race. It almost certainly is going to be down to in-game characteristics, their damage, defense, skills, abilities, things of that nature. You might just have to deal with the fact that if you give people the free will to pick who they want to pick, you might not get the results that you want in your game. Now, whether that's good or bad is a different discussion. It's totally fine that some characters are picked more than others in games. And just because characters are picked less, we have to make sure that we don't automatically assign that to character lore reasons, when it seems to me in my game playing experience that it's almost entirely the in-game abilities and stats that will determine whether characters are picked or not. In another research project, my team worked with a soccer federation trying to decrease discrimination. So I would assume that the issue here is that soccer teams discriminate on race and sexuality based on who they hire. I mean, maybe. I don't know anything about soccer personally. I might think that there are certainly soccer teams, because soccer is a very global sport, so I can absolutely believe that there are teams out there, and there are countries who would discriminate against people because of their sexuality or race when it comes to putting them on the team. But I don't think that this article here is meant for them. It's meant for you and I, right? Places like United States, Canada, Britain, generally in Europe. In a randomized trial, we found that an email to coaches about how the sport can promote inclusivity and reduce racism helped raise awareness. Well, I mean, I don't want to say no duh to the guy who wrote this, but duh. If you send people an email about something, it will raise their awareness about something. Whether or not that has any actual effect is probably going to be the more useful piece of information that comes along with that. I've been made very much aware of diversity and inclusion, right? Oh, believe me, I've been made very aware. But, well, the messaging often determines my receptiveness to this, as well as the statistics and the principles behind it. There's a big difference between telling me and telling people, you need to pick this character in a game because they're gay, and telling players, you shouldn't be against picking this character because they're gay. Those are two entirely different messages. And often it seems like the people who want to promote these sorts of things don't know how to put those messages out. They all the time, right off the bat, get super righteous and indignant, and they want to browbeat gamers. In a way, you've already done that yourself. Maybe you guys do that without even thinking about it. Maybe I need to send an email to you to raise your awareness. We hope to do the same in esports by working together with people from within the industry who want to improve the equity and inclusivity of the community. Now, I doubt you will find anyone who will object to having esports have more equity. Equity is being fair and impartial. It's vital to having a healthy sports environment, a competitive environment. You want to have equity. It's like the foundation, it seems, of any game that you play against other players. It's necessary. I don't even have to talk about why being fair and impartial is needed in a competitive environment like esports. Now, inclusivity, that's a word that's got a lot of tarnish these days. Now, as far as inclusivity goes, as far as I'm concerned, concerning inclusivity, I don't want anyone to be excluded from a game because of their race, gender, or sexuality, or nationality, right? That's not good. But, right, there's a difference between saying no one should be excluded and saying people should be included, right? I think that there's a difference between these two statements. Ultimately, when we talk about trying to create an environment within a group, let's take esports, right? Esports is dominated by men. It is dominated by men. I've seen multiple estimates that put the percentage of professional video game players who are female at anywhere between 5 and 8%. Now, if you ask me if this is a bad thing, then I will need more information. I will have to ask, why is only 1 in 20 to 1 in 9 or so? How come that is the rate of female players? What's the reason? Now, if that reason is because they're being actively pushed out or being dissuaded from joining because they are female, then I have a problem with that, and I think that's an issue that should be alleviated. I don't want to deprive esports of talent just because it comes from a woman. I want the most competitive and meritocratic system to exist when it comes to, an esports competitive environment. But if you said that women just generally aren't as interested, women would rather do other things, and I don't know if this is true, if there's something within the biology of a woman that maybe doesn't owe itself as well to the kinds of esports games as sort of men have, right? For whatever reason, in much the same way that we split up men and women in most other sports. Now, that would be different. So the reasons why these things exist, I think, are, if anything, the most important thing. Because if you create a fair environment where everyone can join, and then people have the free will and the opportunity to go wherever they please, then maybe the demographics will not sort themselves out as you want in your mind. And if it turns out that there's no difference whatsoever in terms of men and women's interests and abilities when it comes to esports, and we really, in a perfect world, should have essentially a 50-50 split in players, then that's an issue that we need to work to resolve, though I highly doubt that that is the case. Some people like to imagine that video games offer idealized versions of reality and teach values that seem to be lacking in the real world, such as fighting for a common cause or working together as a team. Well, people who imagine those things about video games, I hope they understand that clearly not every video game is designed to really teach moral lessons or to instruct us in values. A lot of games don't really have a narrative or a story element that you could point to. And of course, a lot of games have as their premise post-apocalyptic settings or dystopian settings, where a lot of these, where we certainly don't get an idealized version of reality. But yeah, sure, video games can absolutely teach, working together as a team. Absolutely, they can do that. Fighting for a common cause, that sort of thing. Yeah, sure. Just an odd way to start a... I am already, with the first sentence, suspecting that this gentleman is not a gamer. Or perhaps he's a very casual one. Hard to say. It's just a suspicion I have. Let me see. The article goes on, but our findings show that the world of video games has the same biases and discrimination we find in our everyday lives, and that games can be much more welcoming for some than others. When we talk about a game being welcoming, you have to be specific with what you're referring to. We get into this sort of exclusion argument when it comes to either game genre, difficulty. For instance, is a very difficult puzzle video game, is that not welcoming to people who either aren't very intelligent, don't have good problem solving skills, or who just don't like puzzle games in general? I don't know. I wouldn't call it that. Though it's the way this is phrased, that games can be much more welcoming for some than others. Not some games can be more welcoming, but just games can be much more welcoming for some than others. And I assume that where this article, this article is about, they're talking about how if you are gay, and I think if that's what you're trying to tell me in this article, you're going to have to work very hard in order to do so. If anything, what I have seen over the last X years is that companies are more than willing to accept the gay dollar to the point of really trying to push having gay characters, promoting gay characters, and not really shying away from it, honestly. And that isn't a problem at all. It isn't a problem at all. In fact, it would be weird if there were no gay characters. I think part of the issue stems from the fact that it often comes across as not genuine, that it is, these decisions to make characters gay are often tactical. They are not done from a position that is maybe pure-hearted. And these sorts of decisions, they can feel cheap, and they can feel like they're not genuine. Players should get over themselves and accept all characters and the players who pick them. So, nice. We already are going after the players in your first paragraph. Personal advice, probably not a great idea to do that. You're not going to get really good reception if you go after players. And also, let's be frank here. Whenever we hear, oh, everyone should be allowed in, we should be inclusive to everybody, they don't really mean that. They've never really meant that. The moment you have a character or a player who doesn't have the right politics or who doesn't have the right stances on the right issues, that goes out the window. Because no company says, oh yeah, we need to have white nationalists, we need to have terrorists, we need to have truly hateful people. No one ever says that. They say we need to be accepting of everybody, but they will scoff at those kinds of people. And to a degree, I can certainly understand that. The problem is that in trying to repulse the worst elements of society, what we get in that broadly casted net is oftentimes people like me, who are very middle of the road, who are fairly liberal people, who are far more progressive than they are. You catch people who are simply not far left, who are not super progressive. You get basic run-of-the-mill conservatives and basic run-of-the-mill moderates. So when I see, as will become relevant later in this article, when I see Blizzard coming out and saying, oh yeah, it turns out Soldier 76 is gay, that rings very hollow to me, like it was done tactically, like it wasn't done with a genuine good heart or a real care about creating a character. It feels like something that was done to score points and wasn't done for what I would call the right reasons. Or it's done to ingratiate an audience when perhaps that company is undergoing legal woes. I wonder, though, is it a problem if a gay player were to not like playing as straight characters? Would that be a problem that needs to be resolved? Because it seems to be an issue that straight players don't always like to play gay characters. Well, if one's an issue and the other isn't an issue, then what's the underlying principle here of what we're trying to accomplish? And again, the reasons for these things is very, very important. This line here of the online gaming community needs to embrace its diverse players and reckon with its bias. I see overwhelming inclusivity and acceptance in the gaming community. I really do. There's always jabs and jeers, and there's always people that are going to make fun of you for this, that, and the other thing. Sure. But this way of trying to almost villainize a community, to patronize them and say, you guys need to do better, you need to fix your behavior, you need to get with the times, you need to get with the program. That's not an argument. You're not making any convincing kind of argument. You're trying to browbeat people into doing a behavior that you want them to do. Maybe instead of after the fact saying that a character is gay, you have characters who are fully fledged characters who happen to be gay. It's the same element that we get in, comics and movies and shows. I mean, you have, look, Arcane is a good example. The character Vi, arguably our protagonist, right? How she is a lesbian, or at least bisexual. No one has a problem with that, because she's written to be a really excellent character. And as we've seen recently with House of the Dragon, if you have characters who are not in the original source material a certain race, and they are race swapped for the show, but the show is excellently well written and the characters are very well realized, and their race isn't made some super progressive, virtue signally kind of message within the series, people don't care at all. They love the show. I certainly love the show. To say players should get over themselves and accept all characters and the players who pick them, whose mind do you think that's going to change? If you have someone who's legitimately homophobic and doesn't like the existence of gay characters, do you think telling this to them is actually going to do something? Do you think this is going to change their minds? Or do you think that maybe it would be a bit more wise to work on a process that will get them to accept people who are different than they are? It's the old saying, you catch more flies with honey, right? And there is also an element of, if you want gay people to be just as normalized as straight people, then you can't give them special treatment, you can't constantly shout bigotry whenever they don't get their way, and you can't try and make a huge deal out of their existence as if it is a very special thing, or even, as it was said in this article, revolutionary. If you want to put them on the same level as the typical straight characters, then unfortunately what that means is you're going to have to do without the fanfare. If you want them to be normal, then they have to be treated normally. Thanks again for listening all the way through. It was nice to read through a little article. I have another one that should be up in a few days, and I'm trying to work hard to kind of catch up. I feel like I've been neglectful, honestly, of the channels and putting out stuff. I've been doing a lot with the podcast, and I've been really enjoying that, but I'm legitimately starting to feel pretty bad about not updating the main channels as much as I should. There's a lot of people there who like my stuff, and I need to really give them more content. So again, please forgive my absence. Things happen. I get sidetracked. I get busy with this, that, and the other thing. As times roll on, things in one's life changes, but I do want to get back to making things, and I've got some strategies for how that'll get accomplished. So you guys take care. You will be seeing more from me rather soon. And again, thanks for watching the videos. None of this would happen if it wasn't for you guys. And give that plushie a look. Link in the description. Helps me out a lot if you maybe picked up one. See you later, guys. Bye-bye.